looking at the town of Great Barrington taking on the likes of Airbnb and winning to some extent. I hope that's not overly dramatic, but I mean,
I'll take it.
you'll take it. A pretty big deal, and there could be a ripple effect. So, first of all, congratulations
Thank you.
that, and tell me how all of this began. Because when you're crafting something like this, there's a lot of different hypotheticals and a lot of different constituencies, and some people may be pleased and some may not be, depending on what the final law becomes. So take me back to that process of how it was crafted.
Sure. So going back to September of 2021, I became a member of the housing subcommittee in Great Barrington. So it was a joint subcommittee of the planning board and Great Barrington Selectboard. And around that time, I kept hearing about issues with renters facing eviction, rents going dramatically higher in terms of the increases, just a lot of people unsettled. And I kept hearing stories of rental properties being turned over and repurposed from long-term rentals to short-term rentals. So, and it was a reoccurring theme. And so as part of the housing subcommittee, I brought this to the attention of the three other members that I wanted to focus on short-term rentals. And they said, great, go for it. And I don't think they actually thought that I'd actually go and write a bylaw.
Right, because there is a great expectation in local government and those who essentially, I mean, this is not your full-time day job.
No.
When you say you're going to do something, people say, oh, go ahead and do it, with a pretty solid percentage expectation that nothing's really going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So they asked the wrong person. So I ran with it. I had a head start and looked at some other bylaws and just dove in and did research and, kept bringing it back to the housing subcommittee. And, we discussed it, and then it moved out from the subcommittee to the select board. And then it went to the planning board, and then it went to the select board. So it was a lot of back and forth. But essentially what we're trying to do is place regulations that, put regulations in place that would limit the amount of short-term rentals in Great Barrington. And this was to create more long-term housing opportunities. So what we were seeing is that some of the rentals were being repurposed, as I said, to short-term rentals. And there was a squeeze that local businesses were feeling on rental property. So their workforce were having problems finding rentals, keeping rentals. That was having a trickle effect on local businesses. And the whole community was really, really feeling this upheaval. And I wouldn't say it was all short-term rentals, but it was really that the pressure that, rent increases were putting in, and just the anxiety that, if you're a renter, what's going to happen next month? And, when your lease isn't renewed, what does that mean? And there were many people coming and saying, well, my rent was increased, 100%, or my landlord said I had to be out, next month.
Therefore, the market of the opportunity of the short-term rental was putting pressure on those who were because I mean, I don't know if this is the scenario, but if landlords are seeing, wow, I can take this same property, turn it into a short term and make huge percentages more over the year-long period or beyond, then therefore they're starting to put pressure on their current tenants to say, we can up your rent, and then also, ultimately, if you're out, then I can convert it to short term. Is that
exactly? So the incentive was there.
Gotcha.
Obviously, if you can make, $1,000 a month as a long term, rental versus, $400 in a short term rental, the money's, the balance sheet looks a lot better when you're short term rentaling. So there was that pressure. And so what we tried to do from a select board point of view was really listen to all the concerns. So we were listening to the concerns of people that operated short term rentals that really relied on the money that they were getting from renting their home as a short-term rental. And we're listening to the renters that were being squeezed out and priced out of Great Barrington, and listening to the local businesses that couldn't find workforce and, had to shorten their hours and had to close businesses. And so we're listening to all these different responses and concerns and opinions, and trying to craft something that would really bring all these together and deter investors and speculators, but also recognize that people, do rely on short-term rental revenue. So it was a long 8 months, and there was a lot of public and community input. So over months and months and months, we honed this bylaw that went from very conservative and restrictive. We focused first on a primary residence requirement. So if it was your primary home, you can rent as a short-term landlord. And if it wasn't, you wouldn't be able to. And from my research, what I found out is there were a lot of other municipalities, cities that went that route because that was the easiest to enforce. And that was the most immediate results.
In other words, the owner occupied aspect. So is that in cases of multi dwelling apartment type buildings?
Yes.
Or, okay.
So you had the absentee landlord. So, if it's not your primary home, you won't be there. And some of the problems were these absentee landlords that, you'd have a property bought, the landlord would never be there, and they would just, have a turnstile almost, and it would be this revolving door of different people coming in and basically operating it like an inn or a mini hotel. So that was creating pressures in the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And what I was hearing particularly were people really concerned that the neighborhoods were eroding, and, families that had once been there were no longer there. There was a feeling that the cohesion was leaving Great Barrington. So there's a lot of different concerns, and through work and listening to public input, we went from the more restrictive policy to a limit. So originally it was a 90-day limit for an unoccupied property, and then from then it went to a 150-day limit. Which is where we landed in terms of the vote at town meeting. So it was, months of public input and really finding a compromise that would work for everyone. So I'm happy to say overwhelmingly it passed at town meeting, and we're going to move ahead in January and put this in, in force.
Yeah, and of course, enforcement's another conversation, but we'll leave that for another day. Just tell me about the sort of politics of this, and maybe looking at the broader picture, because we know obviously, within a community there's going to be differing opinions and people who have different interests, and certainly people who were probably taking advantage of more than 150 days of short-term rental, and so they're not going to be happy with it, whereas the people who are looking for the neighborhood cohesion, and I think that's a majority of people, were happy for it, and of course the vote showed. But this dynamic with an Airbnb coming in and actually politicking in local politics, what was that like to see that? Because from time to time, you get issues like this, and corporations and trade organizations, for lack of a better description, do look at these very carefully, because there can be very much a ripple effect.
So what happened was at one point, I think it was in the beginning of the process, I think it was maybe November or October, there was a giant billboard in Great Barrington that said, monetize your Berkshire home, or monetize your property, or I can't remember, monetize your investment or something. And that was right in the heart of Great Barrington. It was right when things were starting to kick off, and that just set fire. Like, that was like, hey, we're on the map, and there's an issue here. So that was the beginning of, for me, kind of like, okay, red flag, we got to do something. And from then we had a local establishment in the Prairie Well, who's a wonderful business and restaurant in town. They put on their sign outside, no housing, no workforce. And so
Mm-hmm.
then they joined in. And
Right.
so then it was like the community boards were lighting up, and I found myself in the middle of this, swell of passion
And that
about
sign, just
housing.
to be clear, so
Yeah,
no housing, no workforce was basically saying, hey, we don't have affordable housing in
exactly.
Great Barrington. How
Exactly.
do you expect us to run a business if
Yeah.
people can't live here who are working at our business?
Exactly.
Right?
So then that's when the misinformation campaign started. So, people were saying, well, this isn't going to create affordable housing. And I said, well, it's never intended to create affordable
Right.
housing. It's intended to create housing that is affordable for our workforce, or affordable for families, or affordable for people that want to live in Great Barrington.
Mm.
So people said, well, this isn't going to do anything for
It's
the
not going to
affordable.
turn the tide,
Yeah,
but it could probably maybe slow the bleeding.
exactly.
Wouldn't you say? Because I
Yeah.
mean, I could see an influx of short-term rentals really, really putting a massive
Mhm.
damage to any kind of affordable housing,
Yeah.
any affordable housing that is there. But no, it's not going to create more.
Yeah, this was like a firewall.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
was like, we actually care about this community, and we care about the workforce, and we care about families, and we want to make sure that, the limited power, limited property that we have is not going to just dissipate and go towards, visitors that have plenty of other opportunities to stay in. So, we have a wealth and a vast of amount of inns and hotels. And so there's plenty of places to stay. And also, this wasn't a ban on short-term rentals, so it's not like we're saying no short-term rentals. There's plenty of opportunities. When I started my research in the very, very beginning, there was 214 active short-term rentals. So it wasn't a huge amount, but when you looked and did a deeper dive, you saw how many of those were owned by investors and short-term rental, second homes. And then you did a deeper dive and saw that a lot of those were full-time rentals, that all year round. So if you think about the cost of building a new unit of affordable housing, let's say, so that's approximately, let's say, $400,000 a unit. And if we could even get one unit that comes from shaking up this short-term rental, what's happening in Great Barrington, we've saved money in the town. We've created an opportunity for someone in the workforce to live. We've created an opportunity for a family to move in and put their kids in school. So we're relieving the pressure. So this was never going to, create affordable housing, but it was going to shake up everything and create a firewall so that we don't have a bullseye on our back. And, investors and speculators are saying, hey, I'm going to just buy a property sight unseen and just operate as a short-term rental, as a commercial property, because, neighborhoods need neighbors. And, without having that cohesion, what is Great Barrington going to be? And it was really a bigger question of values, and where do we see ourselves in 2, 3, 5 years? Are we ready to kind of give ourselves into being a vacation village? And what percent is enough?
Right. Because without any regulation, the vacation village could be a reality very quickly, simply because the market is there, and an LLC, a corporation, whatever, without any regulation, could come in and literally buy block by block. Because they're going to return on that investment, clearly, with the housing market how it is, and Great Barrington being attractive the way that it is, particular during the summer months. So it would be a huge opportunity for these corporations, which would completely dismantle the character of neighborhoods. And you know what? Maybe there's some people out there who say, yeah, great, go for it. But I'm not one of those people. I know you're not, obviously. Because
and it wasn't about me. So, it was, I wasn't sure really what would happen at a town meeting, but I knew that it was really important to bring a vote, to bring, our best chance at a bylaw to the voters and let them decide. So, for a while I said, maybe I'm not the right person to represent Great Barrington. Maybe I'm horribly, I'm getting us all horribly wrong, and people don't care, and they just, they want the money, and, they don't care if it becomes a vacation village. So for a while I kind of wavered. I was like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but my goal was to bring it to the voters and bring the best bylaw we could. And so when they voted overwhelmingly, I said, okay, well, at least we're on the right track. But no, I mean, some of the research I've done, I mean, if you look at Galveston, Texas, you look at Aspen, you look at Vail,
Right.
you look at Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. I mean, they're just being overrun.
Mm.
And, I felt that we had to do it quickly, because if we waited, the more we wait, the more we're opening ourselves to these speculators. And we didn't have time. We didn't have time to wait another year. And, so, it's a learning process. And part of my research was, can we enforce it? So when you asked about enforcement, I wanted to make sure we could actually pull it off as a small town. And so I did some research, and there was one organization that I found called Granicus, excuse me. And they were a monitoring and compliance business, and they worked with municipalities for doing various things. But one of the things that they do is monitoring short-term rental regulations. So they did a presentation that I was in on, and they showed us a dashboard, and they show how it works. And basically, they scrape the internet, no different than someone would be if they're doing internet searches, or looking at SEO. Or so basically, they look at all the different things in addition to Airbnb. That look at the community boards, etc. Because there are short-term rentals that are flying under the radar. So they get a sense of what's actually out there, and then they would help us, really bring this to a closing that we could actually enforce it and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because municipalities that haven't enforced it, it doesn't go well for them. So.
And but first, you have to have the regulation in place even before you can enforce it. And I know
Mm-hmm.
even in municipalities that have very strong zoning codes as far
Mm-hmm.
as number of units in certain zones and things like that. Even sometimes that is tough to enforce, but you have to have the regulation first
Yeah.
before you can do that.
Yeah. And I will say, one of the very early things that we did, I looked at the difference between a zoning bylaw and a general ordinance.
Mhm.
And that was something that I felt strongly that we should lean towards a general ordinance. And I think that,
I love this. Now this is like really geeky stuff that I love. And
so
we may have
my
lost a few
instinct was
listeners.
right. I
but
know.
I
Well,
love,
okay.
I
For
love this
anyone
shit,
that
so.
likes that is thinking about doing this, I would suggest looking into a general ordinance.
And why is
I'll
that?
be happy. In terms of the voting, it's a simple majority, so you could win on one vote rather than a 2/3 vote. So politically, it's a savvy move. Some people said that was the only reason why I was doing that, but my point was that it affects the whole community. And if we tried to zone it, let's say no short-term rentals in a residential zone, that wouldn't fly, because that's where you make your money.
Of course.
So yeah, I just knew it would be a losing proposition. So
exactly.
I won't get too much in the weeds by that.
No, but that's good. That's good, because those those are the things that make a difference. Yeah. And I think, and I just want to point out that how long have you been on the Board of Selectmen?
I just finished my third year.
Third year. So again, looking at when people come and they campaign and they run for office, I will say a vast majority of elected officials do go in and they maybe want to do something, but then they kind of get caught in the weeds and they don't do big things. They may think about that running for office, but a lot of times it just simply doesn't happen. So you are not the norm as far as that goes. I just want to say that because I've seen a lot of elected officials, a lot of people run for office, get elected, and then see what they do. You've brought home the bacon, and you believed in something, and you took it to the goal line. Yeah, thank you.
And this was something similar when I first started at the Selectboard. I brought the home petition about the horse racing. There was a commercial. I won't get into all that, but there was a commercial horse racing organization that was trying to come in and operate horse racing in Great Barrington. And I caught a legislative loophole that would have allowed them to come in and operate commercial horse racing right in Great Barrington without any vote of the Great Barrington residents, without us even knowing about it. It would just pop up. And, we would have special permits, but we wouldn't have the ability as residents to say, yes, we actually want this in our town. So that was something that, I'm a bit of a geek because I was a film editor once upon a time, and I really get into the minutia of things. And when I caught that, I said something's wrong here, and then I did more research, and so I think something similar with this bylaw is that I ended up doing research, and I ended up reading other bylaws, and I saw the difference between a general ordinance and a zoning bylaw, and I said, that's the way to go. And So, you really have to do the deep dive and, care a lot about your community, which is what I do. So,
Yeah, and that was interesting too, because there were, I'm sure, very powerful interests interested in bringing horse racing back to Great Barrington. And,
yeah.
I mean, some people on the outside say, well, why not? Why not,
Mm-hmm.
do something like that? I have a feeling, though, among residents, I mean, because in the Berkshires, maybe, the folks at the Chamber of Commerce
Mm-hmm.
or, others may look at it and say, oh, this could be a cash cow. This will be
Yeah.
great. And it would be probably. Um, but you're representing Great Barrington. And my
Yeah.
sense is, and not knowing Great Barrington as well as you do, but, I had a sense that probably the town and the residents of Great Barrington probably were not
Yeah. Yeah.
too stoked about it.
Yeah. I definitely ruffled some feathers without realizing I was ruffling
Oh, I know you
feathers.
did.
You probably heard about it in Pittsfield. So, and some people were saying she's grandstanding, and I'm like, no, I'm just, learning. And my thing, similarly to the bylaw, is I just wanted the Great Barrington residents to have a voice. It was like, have a voice, give us the opportunity to vote. Don't try to use this loophole in Boston to ram through this commercial horse racing operation. And same thing with the bylaw here. There's so many obstacles put in the way, and all I was trying to do is bring it to the voters. And there was just all these challenges. There's still challenges even after the bylaws passed. And so the voters have spoken, the residents have spoken, and we're gonna keep monitoring this. This doesn't have to be the end all and be all. We're gonna get the data. We're gonna make sure it's working. We're gonna tweak things. So, this is all progress, and this is all about, working with the citizens to make sure, we're going in the right direction.
So you're not from Great Barrington
Oh, no.
originally. You're not from the Berkshires originally.
No.
Where are you from?
I don't have the Berkshire accent doing.
What is the Berkshire accent?
I don't know. Are you from the Berkshire?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. And it's funny because when you start talking, I'm gonna start talking Irish. No, I'm from Washington, D.C. I was born in D.C. I was raised in Chevy Chase, Maryland, which is a very wealthy community, but it was not like that when I first lived there. So it's just on the border of D.C. And so I lived there, was born there. My parents worked in DC, and went to college in Ithaca, New York.
What'd your parents do?
So do you want the whole? So my parents, so my dad is African American. He's Black, and both my parents are deceased. My mom's white, and he was a senior advisor at HUD for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And he worked his way up from there. He was born in Chicago. He was an orphan, and he was given up for adoption right when he was born. And he lived in a group home his whole life. And Mahalia Jackson, gospel singer, was his foster mom for a lot of it. And he became very close to her. And he worked his way up and joined the U.S. Army and became a sergeant major, and married my mom in 1965 when interracial marriage was still illegal in many states. They married in Connecticut, so that it was okay then in that state. Then they moved to Chevy Chase, where I was born. And when they moved in, two families moved off the street because my dad was Black.
Wow.
And our neighbor across the street never spoke to us ever. Like, whatever, so many years we lived there from 65 to, I don't know, 2008. So there's there was racism. And anyway, so I think you're talking about my dad.
Well, I mean,
first
of all,
yeah.
I mean, we're talking about housing.
Yeah. So my dad.
I mean, this hits home. I mean, this is near and dear.
Yeah.
To your heart. I mean, you may think, short-term rentals, Great Barrington. Yeah. Affordable housing.
Yeah, there's a thread for sure. And that's interesting you said that, because my dad was a fair housing advocate. He was he was very passionate about affirmative action and minority business development, and just ensuring that there wasn't discrimination in housing. And he fought very, very hard for that. And he moved from housing into civil rights. But it's funny to come back to your question about housing. So when I was a film editor, I was a film student in Ithaca College, and a film that I made was called Home Sweet Home. And it's just funny that you said that, because it was this whole theme of home, and it was this particular film won a national award, and that's how I got, ended up in Los Angeles. But it was about a family putting their father into a nursing home. And so it's just, it's kind of funny that this whole thread. But so my dad, yes, so he was very, very passionate about fair housing, and he moved from HUD, working as a senior advisor, to being placed on an assignment to work in Atlanta, Georgia, for Coretta Scott King. And he, his whole life was around civil rights and fair housing. And so he moved to Atlanta, kind of really a seminal moment in my life when I was probably around 13 years old. And he ran the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. He was the executive director and the vice president. And he got that kind of going. And then he worked into really setting the Martin Luther King holiday in place. And he became the principal architect of that. So for a while, he had two jobs. So he was running the King Center. He was putting together and lobbying Congress all over, flying all over the place, trying to get the votes to get the holiday in place. And then he was coming home. And when the holiday finally passed, when President Reagan finally signed it, he then became the executive director of the commission for the federal holiday. So he was in charge of this 40 person commission that their job was to promote the Martin Luther King holiday and make sure that actually worked. So, for a long time, for 10 years or so, he was traveling back and forth between Atlanta and DC. So he was very, very involved in housing. And so housing means a lot to me.
Now, okay, so this, relationship, and obviously everything you're saying, amazing about what your dad has done. Tell me about what were the conversations like in the home, or did he have those conversations with you, or were you picking it up through osmosis, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, I was so interested in sports and boys. I couldn't care less what my dad was doing. It's kind of funny. And I have this really funny memory of my father. He was talking to President Reagan on the phone in our kitchen. And I don't know why I knew it was President Reagan. I think he was just saying, if the phone rings, don't pick it up or something. I don't know. But I just remember that. And and we had a tiny little kitchen table, and I don't know. I guess I was watching him, or I was washing dishes or something, but for some reason I was in the room, and he had this yellow legal pad. He was just doodling, and he had these all funky doodles, and he was just kind of whatever, and he was talking, and I didn't really know what he was saying, but it was probably some amazing historic moment in time, him lobbying the president. But I just remember looking at his doodle saying, oh, that's kind of cool. But my dad always used to doodle. So the funny thing is, I was aware what he was doing. And when the president signed the legislation at the White House in the Rose Garden, my dad didn't go. And I don't know why. But he said my mom and me and my half sister could go. And so we went in his place, and, we got to kind of look at Stevie Wonder and Andrew, all these people, and, President Reagan, and we got to sit there, and, I still have my telegraph when it came. But my dad was so busy. I mean, he was just so determined to make it work. I mean, it took them, until the year 2000 to pass it in all 50 states. So his work wasn't done, even, in 1984 when it was signed, or 1983 when it was signed into legislation. He still had work to do. So I was aware that he was doing all these great things, and we got to go to the Kennedy Center when they were raising money, and Stevie Wonder wrote, happy birthday. And, so he was having these great calls. And I remember I was a big U2 fan, and he said, oh, this Irish band is coming to the King Center. And as soon as he said U2, I was like, I want to go, so I couldn't care what he was doing about civil rights. It's like, I wanted to see U2. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really learn about my dad, unfortunately, till after he passed. And, I was with him when he died, and I didn't realize the significance of the fact that he never knew his parents, that he was raised in a group home. And I remember one of his last words is, the name of his mom, who I didn't know who it was. He just said Ollie. And so he passed, and he had donated all his papers to the Amistad research center in Tulane University. So they have one of the largest collections of African American documents and research there. So I went to Tulane University and I researched my father. And I went there and just, I kind of apologetically said, "Hi, I'm Leigh Davis. I'm here to, read stuff about my dad." And they were like, "Oh my God, you're Leigh Davis," And so
wow.
it was amazing. They had boxes and I had to kind of go through and they had pictures of my wedding and, letters from John F. Kennedy and pictures of my dad and Mahalia Jackson. And it was just unbelievable. And so I learned more about my dad, unfortunately, after he passed. And when I went to close up his office in DC at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, all the doormen and the people that his staff were just weeping and telling me all these great things about my dad, and I was just I didn't know about it. I was just like, God, I missed a whole lifetime with him. But he was very closed about his past.
That's interesting. You ever wonder why?
I think it was he had a really hard life.
Yeah.
He had a really hard life and he was so determined. He was so determined to make a difference. And I definitely know that that's where I get it from, for sure. Yeah. But anyway, so, yeah, I mean, he definitely had tenacity and, went through adversity and, just everything I read about him is just like, oh my gosh. And then even the fact that, he married my mother in 1965 when the world was against, whites and blacks marrying, God forbid. And he moved into a white neighborhood, Chevy Chase,
after Defiance,
and he was just like determined to and he never said no. I mean, when he was called to service, he did it. He just stepped up and he did it. So and then my mom was just another amazing. I mean, she was Sergeant Shriver's right hand woman for years and years and years. And Sergeant Shriver, was the first executive director of Peace Corps and was married to Eunice Kennedy, who was John F. Kennedy's sister. She was the sister of John F. Kennedy and, long legacy of Kennedys. And so my mom was just this, she was so loyal to the Shrivers and they became like a second family to me because, she would take me to work and I'd be at the Shrivers' house. And so Timberlawn is where they started Special Olympics. And that was my second home. I mean, that was in the beginning when Special Olympics was starting. And so, and then, when Sergeant Shriver ran for president, first he ran for vice president with McGovern. So, I was around for all that. We had Shriver, McGovern posters everywhere and, Shriver for president posters. And they were just such a good family, and again, I learned so much from them. I mean, good hearts, humility, hardworking, service to the community, service to the world. So both my parents were just, legends in my life, but unfortunately I didn't recognize that until they were gone pretty much, So that's a lesson for those young people out there. It's kind of sad.
Wow.
But I definitely feel them with me.
Do you I mean, you're spiritual. You feel they're with
for
you.
Sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Ithaca,
yes, Ithaca. Ithaca was a film school. I studied very hard. I didn't have fun. I probably should have had more fun. But yeah, I threw myself into film and television. I was producing, freshman year. And I was just, again, I was very focused on filmmaking and, made films. And then was headhunted by a alumni that was producing a film called Boxing Elena, and David Lynch. I don't know if anyone knows who David Lynch is, but David Lynch was a big, he did Eraserhead and Elephant Man and Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet. And I was a huge David Lynch fan. So anyway, so my friend Carl, who was producing this movie, said, "Oh, Jennifer Lynch is directing it and wrote it. Do you want to be her assistant?" And I was like, yes, I got a chance to meet David Lynch. Anyway, so long story short, I finished Ithaca, did well, and worked in Los Angeles as an editor for 8 years and joined the union and worked for DreamWorks and, Warner Brothers. I can drop all these names and studios, but it was a real, lots of hard work.
As far as editing, you were literally taking the films, the DreamWorks films, and you were the one doing the hands-on work?
Yeah, I
Was that-
started in film. I was on the cusp of film and digital. So when my very first film was Paramount Studios, Adam's Family Values, and there were two editors, and Artie Schmidt and Jim Miller, excuse me, and they were cutting film. I mean, had benches and film and splicers and splicers. And
Wow.
it was, yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, I would come back from lunch, and my bench would have like little frames like stuck to my bench, and I would have to put like one frame of film in 1,000,000 feet of film. Like I'd have to find where it goes in reels of film.
I just can't.
It was
even
incredible.
imagine.
I mean, this is why I'm so focused, because I mean, it was incredible. So you'd have this literally hundreds of thousands of square feet or not square feet, hundred thousands of feet of film, and you'd have to put it back. And anyway, so I started out in film.
Do you ever look back and say, oh my God, these people have it so easy?
Oh yeah. Well, the funny thing is
the stuff that we can do on our iPhone.
It's crazy.
Well, go into iMovie and do all of that. Unbelievable.
Oh no, it's crazy. And I'm so thankful I did it, because it gave me the ability to pace a film, to really think about story and character development. And they always say that the old school editors are the best editors, because you would get on a chem, and the time that it took to rewind the reels, it made you think about pacing. And it wasn't just like cut. So my early films were done on film, and then when the studio started buying digital equipment, they were trying to decide between Lightworks and Avid. And so Universal Studios purchased Lightworks, and I was hired to be an assistant editor on Law and Order, which is a television show. And
nice.
Yeah, that was fun.
Cue in the
yeah. I hated that show. I quit, actually. My mom was really upset. My parents got jackets, Law and Order jackets and hats, and then as soon as they got to wear them, I'm like, Mom, I quit.
I quit this. Burn these.
But anyways,
things.
yeah. So long story short, then I started getting trained on digital equipment, and then Dreamworks hired Avid, or started buying Avids. And then I got hired by Steven Spielberg, to work on a show called High Incident. And they said, do you know how to work on Avid? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. And I had no clue. And that was the Macintosh. And I had no clue. I started work, and I didn't have a Macintosh. I didn't know. I just bluffed it and did well.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was fun. It was fun days. So it was 8 years of really intense work. And I made a lot of money and saved and moved to Ireland and blew it all. No, that's a joke.
So you were in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah.
Doing well, 8 years. And then what makes you move to Ireland?
I fell in love with the Irishman, which I don't recommend. No, I'm kidding. Well, you can have fun with them. Just don't marry them.
You already loved U2,
yeah.
So
yeah,
it was
yes.
you're already halfway
another
down
theme in my life. Yes, that's probably what happened. I like the accent. So I met him. Let's see. When I was a student in Ithaca, I got a job to take kids over from America to Ireland, and I met him in the summer, and he was a bartender and I was a waitress. And long story short, he followed me back to LA, hung out with me for 8 years, and we lived at the beach, and he had fun and I worked.
I love the idea of hanging out for 8 years.
And then
so you worked
Ireland,
and he was at the beach.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I didn't care. And then we moved back to Ireland, and I quit Dreamworks. Yeah, I quit Dreamworks. I quit Spielberg, because I rescued a dog on my way from LA to San Francisco on a beach. And my landlord wouldn't let me keep him. And I was so headstrong. I said, that's it. I quit. I quit Hollywood. And anyways, I moved to Ireland, and I wanted to raise sheep. And I moved into a farmland, and I realized I couldn't raise sheep because I didn't know what I was doing. So I ended up rescuing sheepdogs and rehoming them. So cool. It's kind of as close to to being a sheep farmer as I could.
What was it like in Ireland? I mean, it's got to be a bit of a culture shock going from LA to rural Ireland.
Yeah, Connemara. Yep. Yeah, Rossmoke. They spoke Irish, like real, like Irish. And so I went and lived there. It was funny. My first 2 years, I was commuting from Ireland to LA. And that's a whole nother story. I have so many funny stories. I went to a bar within my first, as a pub. I went to a pub first couple of months there. And I mentioned to someone that I used to be a film editor. And they said, oh, an American editor, American film director, producer from Hollywood, just opened up a studio down the road. And you should go check it out. So I checked it out, and it turned out to be Roger Corman, who's like this big, B movie king. And anyways, long story short, someone came out of this big warehouse and struck up a conversation. And I said, I used to be an editor. And she goes, our editor just quit. Can you work? I'm like, sure. So I ended up editing for 2 years. And then I was still in the union in LA. So I was literally, I would get a really good gig and I would go to LA for 8 weeks.
And you had to go to LA to edit.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's still digital. Yeah. At that point it was digital, but like the studios wanted you there. And,
I was gonna say maybe today.
Yeah, I know. Probably.
Yeah. It's still, oh hell, you could be in Great Barrington. And still edit.
Exactly. So that shows you how different it is. I mean, they hadn't quite done that yet. It wasn't fast enough to do that. Yeah. But now that I guess everyone does that.
And what year was that?
Gosh, I'm so bad with numbers. I was in Ireland from 89 to 98. So, and then I had my first child in 2001.
2001.
So there was like a little gap of time that I was still editing. And then the funny thing was the last film, I was pregnant and I was editing in Baltimore. And I was trying to hide the fact that I was pregnant. I was like, being like, no one's going to show, because I didn't want to be weak, and I was like, no one's going to know us. And I was like, literally would be editing and then I would go throw up and I'd come back and, because I had like morning sickness and then they would have these parties and I wouldn't drink. And so at the wrap party, I was all, happy. And I announced I was pregnant and they all started laughing like, we all knew you were pregnant, So that was my last gig in Los Angeles. And then I became a teacher. Then the university heard about me and then they offered me a job and I became a tenured professor teaching.
And your mom, how many?
3 children.
3 children. Okay.
Yeah. 21, 20 and soon to be 17. No, 21, 18 and soon to be 17. July 4th. I have a July 4th baby.
Man.
And I have a Christmas Eve baby. So.
Nice. What is it like to have like 17 is the youngest?
Yeah. She's going to be a junior at Monument.
My goodness.
Yep. I'm old. I'll be a
no. I mean,
empty nester.
Not so much that thinking like,
yeah.
I mean, is that to think, wow, after all these years, and then
it was
to get to that place where you kind of dream about like, but you never really want to get there in a way because you're like, man, these years are really great.
Yeah, it was from coming over here because I was I had a relationship breakdown, and so I was basically a single mom the whole time I was in Ireland, pretty much. So I had 3 kids by myself and was a solo parent, no communication with the father.
How the hell did you do that?
I don't know. It was really bad.
I mean,
yeah. So I have mixed feelings about Ireland because it was a very, very dark hole in my life. I pulled through it. And one of the ways I pulled through it was moving to America, unfortunately. So, although I had a really good job and I had a house and, on the surface, I had it all, but I just knew that I needed a sense of security and community. I mean, we come back to home now. So I moved the 3 kids over here with me and they were 3, 5, and 7. So when they moved here, they had Irish accents. They were like off the boat Irish. They were so cute. And I still had an Irish accent because I'd been there for 12 years. And we didn't know Great Barrington.
Now, when do you slip into that Irish accent?
Yeah. If a couple of beers and Guinness, and or if someone's Irish, it's so funny. If I talk to someone, I go into that brogue. It's really, and people are like, "What are you doing?" It's really, and then like every other word's a curse word. I know, it's really funny. Yeah.
Is that when you came here?
Yeah. So I moved here from Ireland. Yeah, I moved here. I bought the house in 2008. I could tell you the whole story of my sad arrival, but my dad passed away and I went back to DC to close up the house, and I took a few days extra to tour America, and I wanted to see New England, and drove around and ended up in Great Barrington. I believe it was New Year's Eve. It was a snowstorm, and I got stuck. My car got stuck in the snowbank, and I had to stay in Days Inn in Great Barrington.
So to be clear, you didn't have any. Was there any?
Oh,
connection?
my kids weren't with me. No, they weren't in the car.
No, I know.
Oh, I did. Yes, I had kids at that point, but they were
no. But connection to Great Barrington, or were you?
Oh,
literally,
I had no connection.
You were literally driving through.
Literally driving
like on
through.
Route 7 or something.
Yeah.
Or...
I must have. I think I was kind of come here for lunch. I mean, obviously, I was going back to Boston to fly back to Ireland, and I think I was going to spend New Year's Eve in Boston. And obviously, you don't get from Boston, Great Barrington to Boston. So it must have been a pit stop. I know I went to Brattleboro. I went to Northampton. So for whatever reason, I was driving through Great Barrington. And got stuck. And because I couldn't move my car, I stayed overnight in the Days Inn. And the next morning I walked and ended up at Lake Mansfield, just kept walking up the hill. If anyone knows Great Barrington, it's, Days Inn's right on Main Street at the corner of Deconic, which is where I bought my house, and arrived in Lake Mansfield. It was snowing and kids were, skating on the ice and pulling sleds. And it was like Norman Rockwell. It was just like so beautiful and so quiet and peaceful. And I just, for something, something just said like, this is home. Like, I don't know, something just clicked in me, and I had no connection whatsoever. And the houses reminded me of my neighborhood in Chevy Chase, that's kind of old houses with the porches. And so I left the lake and I walked down to Connick, and I saw Wheeler & Taylor Insurance, and I was like, I have no clue where I am, but I want to ask about houses. And I walked in and I said, if a fixer-upper ever comes up, I assumed they're really expensive. I'm like, fixer-upper ever comes up, let me know. And I said, this is the street I saw. She's like, where were you? And I'm like, there's a lake. And she's like, oh, you're on the hill, like straight away. And I'm like, I have no idea what the hill is. And I said, but I saw this street. And she said, she wrote it down. And then I went back to Ireland the next day. A month later, she emails me. She said, a fixer-upper on the street that you mentioned is coming up for sale. It's a short sale. Wow. If you don't act quickly, it's going to go. And I literally flew over 2 days later and made an offer, and they accepted it. And I was sitting in the Cove. This is getting so in the weeds, but you can cut it. I was sitting in the Cove bowling alley, had no clue. And I got a call and like, the house is yours. And I'm like, what? I was like,
all the great things happen at the Cove.
Yeah, exactly.
Bowling alley.
Exactly.
Let me tell you,
so lots of great stories there. Anyways, you're welcome to cut all that. I'm sure it's boring.
I mean,
but anyways, there's a through line.
Does the universe not perform in unbelievable ways?
Yeah.
Because what are the chances of that? You go through and you're struck with this, and don't tell me there's not some sort of intervention, as far as just
yeah, no, there's definitely
divine timing. I mean, it's and it struck you, it was meant to be,
for sure. I mean, my life has always been guided by something bigger than myself, for sure. It still is. So I don't know I'm guided. I'm like, okay, I'll keep following. So I have no idea. It doesn't make sense. Most everything I do does not make sense. I mean, even when
in what way? I mean, because
I left Ireland at the top of my career. Like, had I stayed I left LA at the top of my career. Had I stayed there, I would have been editing, Law and Order and Dreamworks. And but no, I just it was kind of like, I want to go to Ireland. It didn't make sense, and me leaving Ireland to come here didn't make sense because I was very settled, and I don't know, and then all the jobs I've had since I've been here, I've kind of fallen into them. I mean, I've never been a marketing director. I've never been a development director. I've never been I've never done political things. So I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of go with the flow.
I do think that one of the way, and if we do mature in a way, or being able to trust your intuition is probably one of the most difficult things, lessons, if people even get there. I mean, it's not an easy thing, but like to cut through the noise and to get there, because I'm sensing that's what. That's your guide.
Yeah, I'm extremely intuitive. Yeah. I can read minds. No, but I've definitely, I'm guided.
What
Yeah.
am I thinking?
I know. I just,
but no, I mean, but
no.
that is a thing. And
For sure.
I just feel as though, you know, we do have that sense but to allow yourself to trust it is yeah.
And I think when I mentioned that, you know, Ireland was a dark period. I mean, it really was a very dark period for me. You know, I was there for 12 years, and had I not reached the depth, you know, that I did, the depth of despair, and I'm not trying to I'm just saying, had I not gone where I went, and it wasn't fun, but it's opened up such, like, you know, awareness, and, you know, I'm incredibly empathetic, and I can just read people. And because I've gone through a lot of things that people have gone through, I just immediately, you know, am drawn to it, and like, how can I help you, and what can, you know. So I think part of my passion right now is that. So had I not gone through that, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So yeah, so I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. It's wonderful. We're lucky to have you in the Berkshires. You know, and I'm not just saying.
I'm very lucky to be here. I mean, the community's been great to me.
So looking at that, you have the day job. Now, you mentioned that the sort of marketing, the development, never expected to do that. But it seems to me that you are driven to do things that actually build community. So I think that goes for your day job also.
Yeah. So when I moved here, the first thing when I moved to Great Barrington, I immediately wanted to volunteer. You know, it was just kind of in me before I even like found how I was gonna like feed my kids. I was like, it doesn't make sense. So I did the Berkshire Shuffle, and I didn't have, you know, although I was tenured and they were holding my job for 5 years, I'm very grateful that I, you know, had that safety net. I still needed money. So, you know, I did the Berkshire Shuffle. So I, you know, got a realtor's license. I started an errand service business by Leigh, so I could, you know, pick up my kids from school and do errands for people. And then I volunteered. So one of the first places I volunteered was Construct, which is the largest provider of affordable housing in the Southern Berkshire. So we manage and own affordable housing. So I volunteered for them. I also volunteered for hospice care in the Berkshires because both my parents had gone through hospice in America, in DC. This is when I get switched between Ireland and America. So anyway, so Construct and hospice were the two places I was volunteering. And so I just did the walk, and I just, you know, helped them with whatever. And so then full circle, now they hired me as their development director. So it's kind of like, you know, when I first moved here in 2009, I was volunteering and, you know, knew about them and was very passionate about housing and would do as much as I could as a volunteer. And that was completely random how I got hired. I mean, I got laid off from a job I was working at, and I ran into a board member in Big Y, and they said, you know, we need a development director. I'm like, I've never done it. You know, you're lucky. Don't look at me. And he's like, you might want to, you know, interview. And I did, and I got it. So, but they're a wonderful organization. You know, they're small but mighty, and, you know, we're just doing such good work. And what's difficult for me is that, you know, I because I work on the website and I get all the emails, you know, every single day I'm getting these, you know, emails from people living in tents and living in cars and in really, really terrible situations. And, you know, to the point that, you know, it's gotten so bad now, people are calling us for tents, you know, and like we're putting as many people as we can in motels if they have an emergency situation. And that's what we're doing. You know, we do rental assistance, we do emergency assistance. You know, we have permanent housing. We also have a transitional home. But just the amount of calls of people being evicted and people suddenly, you know, they've been couch surfing for so long and now they can't do it any longer. And it's just heartbreaking. So, you know, having that balance of being the development director for Construct and being the vice chair of the Selectboard, it's great because there's that continuity of, you know, housing and community, and a lot of the same conversations I'll have as a Selectboard member kind of roll over into Construct, which is great.
But you mentioned, you know, because as you're saying this, you know, I'm thinking, okay, well, what are the factors that are driving this? And if the problem and the issues have been exacerbated, and I'm thinking, okay, well, there's the cost of housing, how that continues to make the situation worse. But what other economic factors? And so you're saying evictions, that's a big deal. Is that because of rent being raised and just people can't keep up with it, or what are some of the other issues?
There's a lack of supply, so it's a combination of a lack. We can't build fast enough. Construct alone, we have more than 800 people on our waiting list for housing.
Wow.
And and we have several hundred just on Great Barrington. So people say, oh well, it's probably all over the Massachusetts. No, this is Southern Berkshire specific. 800 people waiting on the housing wait list. So it's a combination of limited supply. We can't build enough. Prices increasing. COVID had a lot. People that had been staying on friends' couches could no longer, because it wasn't safe to be in that close proximity to people, and just more people moving into the Berkshires. So when you have people moving in, let's say during the pandemic, it's pushing prices up,
right,
and it's pushing people out.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, what's happening is people are being pushed out of their hometown, and then they're trying to go up to North County, where we are right now, and then North County is starting to get expensive. And then where else do they go? So we have people that are working in Great Barrington that are driving an hour and a half to get to work.
Yeah.
And where does that end?
Yeah. And I think, it's one of those questions for, especially for Southern Berkshire, because, the, more urban areas of the Berkshires are the ones with a little bit more affordable housing. Pittsfield even has its own lack of affordable housing. But when you look at it, people are working in Great Barrington, people are working in Williamstown, and they can't live in that community. And so that's always been, and I'm sure you've seen it. I don't know what the attitudes are, or how, I think I know, but you see it firsthand, I'm sure, because you're having these conversations maybe with, I don't know, developers and landowners and other people who have, stakeholders and those with some political power in the community and economic power in the community. Tell me about that as far as the Southern Berkshire dynamic and the difficulty in finding a way to grow affordable housing. It's a loaded question, I know, or maybe not.
No,
maybe it's a simple question.
It's interesting. So one of my roles as a select board member was to be on the economic development committee, and I was also a member of the finance committee. So I saw really behind the curtains of economic development and what developers want and what they need to be incentivized to create affordable housing. And there's a lot of obstacles in their ways, in terms of not enough subsidies, too many zoning challenges, paperwork, permitting. And so there's a lot of things that we don't make it easy for them. So as an official, I'm aware of those, and working in development, I was the development director over Eagle Mill, which was we were renovating the mill in Leigh, and you can see what developers need to really make it worthwhile for them to invest, because they are really putting a lot on the line. So what I'm finding is in Great Barrington, we have developers that are very, very committed to community. And there's one particular developer I'm thinking of that he could raise his rents easily, but he knows that he's providing such a resource to the community for the workforce that he keeps his rents low. And even for his commercial properties, for his stores or storefronts, he keeps it reasonable. So we have, developers like that are community focused, and they realize that, they're doing something good for the community, and they have the ability to do that. Then you might have developers that, if they can get the top price, they will. So it's kind of, you're talking to both camps. And so where's the middle? Do you incentivize developers to rent affordably? Do you pay them money so that they, instead of going to the market rate, they go to the affordable housing? So what's the magic pill? And so there's various things. I'm working on something right now that's honing in on workforce housing and repurposing, let's say, inns and motels into affordable housing and workforce housing. So there's a lot of available housing that we don't have to build, that we just need to repurpose, and we need to incentivize developers to do the right thing. rather than just building, because we can't build our way out of this crisis. I mean,
and I think it's a good point to make. I think at least that's how I've understood it, is that affordable housing is relative compared to the town that it's in. So affordable housing in Pittsfield is at a different rate as what is affordable housing in Lenox and Great Barrington. I don't know if that's the fair approach, because I don't know if wages are that much different, right? In Great Barrington versus Pittsfield, probably not. But I always found that a little strange, when you're identifying affordable housing, but it is still based on the market that it's in.
Yeah. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, they have charts and they work with area median income. So Pittsfield is in a different range, although we're in Berkshire County than Great Barrington slightly. So they'll look at, between 30% and 60% AMI for affordable housing. Right. And that's where the highest subsidies are for the government to give money towards a developer. But then there's that kind of workforce housing, so then that goes from, let's say, 80% AMI up to 120% AMI. So what is a family of 4 at 100% AMI versus 30? So you have that kind of sliding scale.
And AMI is
area median income. So they're looking to see what the wages are. What's the income that a typical individual will, at 100%, what is it that they would bring in if they were living in Great Barrington? So it's very, very helpful, because it's a realistic view into what a person that lives in Great Barrington can afford. And it's quite shocking. It's very, very low. And the issue is that we're competing with people that are bringing salaries from, elsewhere. So they're getting 5 times the salary and they can pay 5 times the price.
Yeah.
And
massive amount of pressure on the market.
It is huge.
Massive.
It's huge. Yeah. So it's definitely it's a struggle, and there's a balance. And I think there's a lot of different things we can do. Like what I kept saying is that, this is just, the short-term rental part of it. That's just one small piece. That's a firewall.
It really is.
It's a firewall, but
it's the idea that somehow this would be a panacea to affordable housing. I mean, it's a very tiny slice of it, an important slice. And
it's huge though, but it's really, that stops the speculator, and I don't mean to be like, because we all want to make money. So, but I'm just saying, you put regulations in place that work. And then you say, okay, well, at least we're kind of protecting our community a little bit. Now let's move on to the next challenge. So workforce housing, that's really big. I mean, luckily, Great Barrington will be reaching the 10% goal that is set by the state for affordable housing for the percentage of the households that we have.
Is any other community in the Berkshires, maybe Pittsfield is in that realm, but other
not very many. Yeah. I mean, Great Barrington definitely is the tops. Wow. Which is super. I mean, we are very, very progressive, and we have good organizations on top of it. So we've been very, very, very lucky. Yeah. So because
right now it's not cheap to build housing. That and in the past, and I can speak to Pittsfield because I just know it more intimately, but those developments to create more housing, a lot of it market rate, the payback for developers is a long time coming, because most of those are historic buildings that have been renovated. In now some cases there has been some new housing built, but most of the new units that have come in over time have been redevelopment of historic properties, which is not the easiest way to make money over time.
Yeah, I heard that in Great Barrington, there hasn't been any new market rate apartments built in years and years and years. I mean, it's insane. And we've had affordable housing developments come on stream, which is great, but it'll never be enough. So again, that's when you look into repurposing. So you have properties there, and they're not being used to their greatest need of the community. So what can we do?
Right. And generally in the Berkshires, housing stock is older, a lot older than other places in the country. Yeah. So it is more expensive to upgrade. So, housing, I've talked about this many times. I don't know if you know Brad Gordon from the Berkshire Regional Housing Authority, great guy. I mean, we've had these conversations, and the housing stock is one of the biggest issues in the Berkshires. And so, new units ultimately over time, it could be one of the solutions. But in this economy right now, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. And where do you put them to,
Yeah.
so you don't want like this spread. You don't want to become, so
or the concentration.
Exactly.
You know,
so
it's like it's there's pros and cons everywhere. I mean, there. I don't know what the best practice is today. Not being the expert in, but you certainly don't want to put all your affordable housing in one building in a town. You know what I'm saying? But then what does that spread look like? How is it integrated into neighborhoods? That sort of thing.
Exactly. So we're looking at zoning in Great Barrington to see, what makes sense. And there's going to be, we're going to be talking about some rezoning to make it easier. And yeah, so we'll see.
Pushing the envelope.
Like picking my next thing to be, attacked on.
That's what so tell me about that, having the thick skin, because you cannot be a successful, I'll say this is what I believe. You really can't be a successful public official unless you develop a thick skin. And there's a lot of folks who have been in it for a long time and they still haven't learned that lesson. That sometimes you just have to put your head down and be like, look, you're going to take your lumps, but you have to keep on going. Listen, take the criticism, tweak here and there, but you gotta keep going.
Yeah. Someone said to me recently that they admire what I'm doing because I lead and I kind of lead on the issues, and where some elected officials will just be process. They'll make sure things are, but there's not that many that actually take an issue and run with it and lead on it, and that was really, really nice. And I've never really thought about that, but once I get my focus on something, I don't let go, and I haven't found that yet, but there's I have a few things I'm looking at right now. But
and that person is correct, and kind of similar to what I said in the beginning of this podcast, is that it's the approach. So when you're sitting there at the city council or a member of a board of selectmen or what have you, issues will come before you. So then your approach starts to become, okay, now how do I work this to kind of maintain as much support as possible at the end of this? That really is a thing. Yeah. There are some people who approach politics in this way, and I didn't make this up. This has been said for years, that your job is to gain as few enemies before the next election.
Yeah, well, the good thing, this is why I don't know if I'd ever make a good politician after this.
Well, that's okay.
I don't care.
Right.
I don't care. I just, I want to do the best for the community. I really don't care.
That self-awareness is so powerful when you stop. I'm gonna say, when you stop caring.
No, it's so true. I just I mean, that's great. It's so freeing. I'm just, so I mean,
do what you believe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You listen to your constituents, you get the feedback, and then you come to a conclusion as to which way, and then let the chips fall.
Exactly.
Where they
so
may.
I always listen. I always try to compromise, and I always, do really, the empathy comes in full stop. And it's not about me. I know it's not about me. I'm just, I'm like a conduit, that's all this. And this is not my life. I mean, this is not my life. My life is community and family, and
Yeah. Well, until when that seat opens up for state rep.
Yeah, right.
Then we see.
Then it all changes.
A lot of people do talk about that. I mean, I've just anecdotally, people say, hey, Leigh Davis, she could be a great state rep.
Okay.
Once Smitty's ready to hang it up.
Don't tell Smitty.
But hey, somebody's got to take the seat. But it takes a certain personality just to be really good at it. So I respect that, and I think I'm a pretty good. I can pick this stuff out. I've been around doing this for a while, so that idea of letting the chips fall where they may, and sort of not caring. It's kind of a weird way to describe it, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. You just you don't care, and yet you care so much that you throw yourself into it for your constituents. Yeah. But as far as the criticism, you gotta let it go.
It's funny on the short-term rental. I mean, I came to a point, I think 4 days before the vote, and I had so much pressure on me, and I had, it's people don't understand what was happening behind the scenes, but a lot of things were happening. working up to this vote. And I told a group, I said, I just need to, I was almost having a breakdown. I was just like, I just need to pause and just, take myself out of this noise. And, I regrouped. I took like a day off, and I, deleted Facebook, and I was just not, which is a big deal. And I just got my energy, and I realized, why am I doing this? I'm doing this for the community, and don't let them beat you down. Like I came back stronger. I was like, okay, I'm gonna win, not win this for myself, but win this to get it over the finish line, that people could vote on it, because there were so many people that were just throwing obstacles and saying horrible things. And, so it does wear you down, but I've learned what to do at that point, to shut off and gain my strength back, and, really take time for myself and realize why I'm here,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there is a purpose.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we have, for sure. Yeah. And, I don't know how spiritual you want to get, but I just, I think people do. And I think, there's an old saying, like, with two important days of your life, the day you're born and the day you find out why you were born, or something along those lines. I probably butchered it, but there's something to that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when my parents passed, they were pretty young, 64 and 72. But I definitely feel that I have their strength, for sure. Yeah.
So what's next? Because you're not done. You got through this. I know there's some maybe challenges happening to it, but because the big guys aren't going to just lay down easy on something like this, so that they may continue to challenge it, but you have another couple of years in this term, right?
So I just was reelected, so I have 3 more years. And I kind of go in this tide, like I feel like there's a wave that's pushing me somewhere, and I don't know where, and I kind of get restless. So I feel like there's restlessness, in a couple of years, probably because my daughter is going to be graduating high school, and I'll be all alone. Maybe that's what it is. Just go start sobbing in a year. But no, I feel like there's this restlessness. I need to keep doing something, and my whole thing is I need to keep learning and progressing and feeling like I'm contributing. So I don't know what's gonna, where I'll end up, but I know I'm going somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But there's always the block party.
Yes, I'm gonna. Yeah. So yes, I'm gonna have a block party. Yeah, and that's always fun, because I love having this eclectic mix of people that from all sorts just show up and be like, oh, I wasn't supposed to talk to you, but I will. I love that.
So were the Irish pubs? Was that a thing for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love music, and I love art, and I love theater. And Galway. So if anyone's going to Ireland, go to Galway.
I mean, there are tons of groups that go to Ireland.
Yeah, the music. I mean, I just
from the Berkshires, there's a lot of it's much loved, for sure.
Ireland. I mean, there is, if you kind of take away my personal circumstances, I mean, it's such a beautiful country. And the music, I mean, you literally walk in and there's just, an orchestra in every single pub almost. I mean, it's brilliant. And they have a hard life, though. They have a hard life. I mean, I don't want to bring it down, but, there's a lot of alcoholism and domestic violence. And, they have a lot of these, demons. And so there's happiness, but there's always darkness under that happiness. So,
what's your place in Barrington?
Tragedy, huh?
What's your place in Barrington?
Oh, where I go.
I mean, maybe there isn't. I don't know. I mean,
I want to open a place. My dream, and anyone that is an investor out there, my dream is to open a small little place that has it's a happy bar. Like you walk in and it's like a good jukebox, and you just go in and it's just happy. There's not like, TVs, and how some pubs you walk in and you don't necessarily have to be a drinker, but like people are just, you end up getting. So the thing with the pubs is that I would go by myself, and I would just end up in these conversations with, a guy. I remember one gentleman, he was 99 years old or something, and he showed me his shoe, and he told me a whole story about his shoe, and it had a hole in it, and how many miles he had walked, and all the adventures, and so these random stories. And so I would love to have a place that people just gather and be like the happy bar,
So that's your place. It'll be
so that's
your
what,
place.
Yeah. I just, because there's some places that you just feel like you need to pick up, you just want to be around people, and, you could just order a Sprite and it's just, you get in a good conversation. So there's a couple places, I don't know.
I don't know anyone who's ever ordered a Sprite and gotten a good conversation, but
I just did recently, actually. That's why I
did you?
Yeah. I did.
I'm just kidding. No hate on Sprite. I just
but I just, so I'd love to have a play, and I love dancing, and there's no dancing.
So, I mean, your story sounds a little bit like Yuki Cohen, because when, she opened Methuselah because she had that, she had that passion to be like, I want to meet people. I want to have that. I want to have that gathering place. So sometimes
I did not know that. Okay. So
you should definitely connect with her. But I think, for sure, when you come down to this, like, sometimes you just have to create the atmosphere, and, you're certainly a creator. You can manifest some things.
So, no, I'd love to do that. I'd love to have that in a place to dance. We have the Egremont Barn, which is wonderful. And we'd love to have something in downtown Barrington. There's the Flying Church, if anyone wants to donate.
The Flying Church.
Yeah, we have a big space. Peter Joff, he's got this brilliant place, and the Helsinki Club moved right when I moved here.
I played open mic at Club Helsinki back in the day in Barrington, and boy, that was really sad when it closed, and they just have it in Hudson now. Yeah, for sure. But man, I loved Helsinki.
Yeah. So I was so excited. So when I bought the house, it was still there. And then by the time I moved there, it was gone. I was like, wait.
Man, no, wait.
So
false advertising.
So we definitely need a place to dance in Barrington for sure.
Definitely. All right. So, well, you got to put that on the docket.
I will. Yeah, exactly.
Why is there no place to dance in Barrington? There's gotta be, I don't know.
It's crazy. And I keep telling people, like I go in a pub, I'm like, you should put a disco ball there. And, I keep trying to put disco balls in different places. So I'm trying to get one in the Miller's Pub, and,
You know what would really brighten this place up? Disco ball.
Just to have it, like, you don't have to use it, just put it there. And then if I see it there, then I'll start dimming the lights and, turning up the music. And then before they know it, like, wait, there's people dancing.
There we go. A disco ball coming near you, Great Barrington. Leigh Davis, it's been a great pleasure. I can't wait to go to the block party, but your story is amazing. And the whole, to me, it's amazing that when your, father and mother, I mean, obviously you had your relationship with them, but to go through and then find out later, I just find that fascinating. But it clearly is a piece of you. I mean, there's whether it's genetics or that energy, it's right there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's there's one interesting story I meant to say about my father. He's Black, but I lived in this neighborhood that they're all white people. I was surrounded by white people, and I didn't, I could pass as white. So everyone, I was dark, but they didn't really know what it was. But I remember when my dad would want to come to school functions, I would encourage him not to come. And it was so sad. And then people would say, where's your dad from? Or I don't know, they'd ask about his color of the skin. And I would say he was from the Bahamas instead of saying he was Black, because I was trying to be posh, because people had money then. And so I didn't want to say he was Black. So it's just this really interesting kind of undercurrent through my life of, not quite fitting in and feeling like I was kind of like the black sheep, and, so to speak, that I didn't quite fit in, but I kind of always had to work against the tides. So it wasn't until, again, after he passed, that I realized all these kind of, gentle things that used to come up in my life, that I would struggle around it and find a way to fit in. And that was something that came to me recently. So, so
I feel like somehow you've transmuted that, because it's almost like you flipped that on its ear in a lot of ways, because, it doesn't seem to me that you're someone who's eager to necessarily fit in anymore, in a way.
Yeah.
Your dad's here. Your dad's here for sure. Leigh Davis, a great pleasure. We'll be seeing you down the road.